next segment because it involves what's happening in our country now. And Indivisible is a social movement that is opposed to authoritarian consolidation, which we believe is happening here in our country. And as a result of that, large numbers of people are organizing to try to build a social movement that resists authoritarianism. And in that process, we are seeing organized activism in our community in a variety of different ways. But the one that's been most in the news lately is the what's happening at the old federal building where the ICE office is. How many people have been hearing these reports?
I heard there was $200,000 damaged out of the federal building.
I haven't heard this. Already number, right? But I'm sorry, but I had a full presentation to bring in. I thought I had it on my jump drive, and apparently didn't transfer. But there's a lot of different narratives floating about what happened. So, what is definitely true is there are protesters at the federal courthouse or the federal ICE offices. Wide variety of different types of protesters, from the interfaith groups in for alliance to indivisible signs of fascism and silent protests to doing what it's inflatables on Sunday. So that basically what's happened is groups have signed on to different slots of time and locations around the federal building with the original intention of making it difficult for ICE to pick up or detain people who are coming into the federal building for their hearings and lining up, being taken and sent up to the detention center in Tacoma. And so the idea of surrounding the building with regular presence to deter that from happening is the original framework for reorganizing that. And there are others that are organizing there, but that want to do they refer to as spicy action. And they're more controversial actions in the sense that there are things like standing within a megaphone and telling ICE people how terrible they are, or asking them, how do you speak and don't keep that down, or sometimes using expletives that most of us wouldn't like to see or have used on us. So what needs to be understood is that's a wide range of protests, but it all falls within the scope of protected speech under the House. And if you think about the federal building, the plaza that's there, that is classic free speech area, spots where people can go to engage in free speech. Public sidewalks, the courtyards of public buildings. The court has consistently held that those have people engaged on those spots have free speech rights. So those people are pressing the edges of free speech, there's no question. But they, at least initially, are not engaged in violence. In fact, all of them are committed to non-violence. And I have to say here that non-violence in this context doesn't mean being passive, doesn't mean standing on the sidewalk and singing and just being nice. It means actively protesting. And so if you think back to the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, those were active movements. And John Lewis crossed the bridge and got plugged down by police cars, walking in the center of the bridge. They didn't have a permit to walk. They were engaged in acting non-violence. And the violence was initiated not by those engaged in the acting violence, but by those who, police in that case, who wound up plugging John Lewis. People don't know who John Lewis was. Important civil rights icon. He's the one that the John Lewis voting rights bills were named after. Very important person in civil rights history. So the point I'm trying to say is that the framing and work that's being done is being framed in that active non-violence. And the violence, the initiation of violence after the ICE officers has always come and initiated by ICE, by DHS, by the Customs and Border Patrol. They are the ones that are initiating the violence. And that violence comes in the form of tear gas, pepper spray, finding us, arresting people in a very violent manner. And of course, the responses to that are not responses. No one's hitting them or fighting them back directly. But there's people are angry when this is happening to people who are there protesting non-violently, however spicily they're protesting. People are angry when this comes towards them. And this is what has happened at the ICE offices here in Eugene. Now, the question about the windows and the framework that Chief Skinner talked about when he called the EPD in, declared a riot, he said in his message that he declared a riot because when the window had been broken, window had been broken, and that people had entered the building, and that it threatened to cause public alarm to civilian employees inside the building. That narrative, we have film now, that narrative is false. Film shows that the DHS officer walked across in front of them with some kind of instrument to shatter the window, shattered outward, tossed the tear gas canister afterward, and then scuttled back. And so we have now two narratives. The one that came out first through Chief Skinner. I'm not saying Chief Skinner didn't believe what he said, but I don't know how Chief Skinner got the information that led him to bring the EPD down to the ICE offices and declare a riot. So what follows is that EPD held the courtyard, ordered people to disperse to declare the riots, ordered people to disperse to hold the courtyard until the particular arm of the Department of Homeland Security ordered tactical units came down from Portland. And when they got here, EPD turned it back over to the DHS to do VORTAC, and VORTAC deployed more tear gas and other types of non-lethal munitions out into the crowd. So the narratives, we need to make clear that the narratives get straightened out. One of the things that's frustrating to me, for example, is that we provided Lookout, Eugene-Springfield, with the video that clearly shows the DHS breaking the window, shattering the window, and asked them to investigate, get the story straight, and find out where the chain of misinformation.
And what has come of that? What has come of that? Has there been a resolution?
No, there hasn't been a resolution. And actually, Lookout published an editorial that basically reiterated their they're feeling that the protesters are not protesting in the right way.
So how come this video wasn't aired on the news so people could see that it was the meeting?
Well, that's a good question. It's been provided.
And Oregon Daily and Movements reported it on there.
That's right, it's on the camera.
Yeah.
It's still not, I wouldn't say it's clear by any stretch. It's overheads. You can't really, you see some bushing.
If you see the
You
one,
can't really see glass.
I gotta tell you, I have the video myself, and it's clear that the window is broken by the.
I've looked as many different videos as I can. I've slowed it down to 0.5. It's not like conclusive evidence. I
I think
mean,
the FBI has been
It's
asking
not.
for evidence of the
Yeah, and I'm
perpetrators.
sure
to
they
just-
have it.
Well, no, be sure that you should send it to the FBI. They've literally posted it where you should contact them. They are specifically seeking out the instigators. That was very public. You're laughing?
I'm laughing at the word instigators.
No, they're looking for whoever did break the windows. So if you have a video as a citizen, it would be responsible, you'd be
no, he's saying
responsible
it
to
was,
provide
he
it.
said the video shows the ads break.
Yeah, I know. The FBI would investigate that.
Oh,
It's
so-
on the,
So there's.
Yeah.
I'll provide
Yeah.
it to anywhere I can give it, right?
yeah, well, there's really a link. I mean, we can try and find it. There's a link where they're asking for that information very specifically. You should send them that
Yeah, the local
information.
news.
So the investigator.
It's actually hard to see. I mean, that's why none of the news channels have come out and very clearly said DHS broke the window, because it's actually not that clear cut.
Well, okay. So
Maybe
just
you're
for
not
sake-
seeing
sake
the
of
same
argument,
video.
First of all, I have to say, I disagree with you. I've used the film multiple times. So let's just say that you're right. If that's the case, why aren't news media coming out and saying it's not clear cut who broke the window?
But you're saying they're coming out and saying that the protesters broke it.
That's been the narrative for the last few years.
Wow.
I would still like an answer to the question, has that video been sent to all the major news networks to air it? If they don't air it, why don't you challenge them to say air this?
Why don't you send it to the FBI? I mean, or
I've never seen it.
Why are you resisting sending it to the FBI?
Say it again.
Send it to the FBI.
I'm not resisting doing it. I don't have.
It's
an-
not his video.
Yeah.
It's not his video.
It doesn't have to be his video. Just send it.
To say, if you have video, send it to
Yeah, I
me.
haven't seen it. I haven't seen
It was on KZI, KVAL, and PMT.
So Stan, is there some,
Announcement.
we would, I think one of the, ways we build the meeting was to help people figure out how to engage respectfully and safely. So how can people convene in a way that's, acceptable and safe, or relatively so?
No, I would say several things. When you start talking about what's being organized in the community, there's a wide variety of things that are being. The ICE officers are only one spot where you can engage. And in the building, the social movement, there's all the social elements that you want to build. And when ACEs came together, they brought all these different social and environmental groups together to be trying to form a social movement by weaving different elements together in a fabric that creates community. And so there's this process of community building, which is itself the type of resistance. More mutual aid and strong community groups that put together, the stronger we are in resisting this from. Even if bad things happen, we have ways to take care of it. There's movements towards general strikes. One of the things that we're involved with is food, day without a murder. And Platoon is the Oregon Farm Workers Union. And they have set forth 6 days where they're asking, 1 day a month, they're asking people not to work, not to go to school, not to shop. It was a type of mini economic strike to show that the people have power. And that's building towards a larger day on May 1st, which is International Workers' Day, to have a larger water demonstration. So that's part of this for mine. It's a movement again to build a large scale social movement that can then illustrate and utilize the power of the movement itself to exercising such power in real ways. So you begin to look at the pillars of power and ask, how do you begin to impact those pillars of power? And not only to make it harder for them to operate, but to get people who are in different pillars of power, like the media or the police departments, to begin to say, we're not going to do these things. We're going to refuse, they're going to refuse to go out and pick people up. We found that it's not good. So we begin to talk about these pillars of power, which we begin to influence them a bit, because alternate training for people who are in it. So, for example, there was just a Republican candidate for governor who just recently said, I'm not going to run for governor because of the Republican Party, as it's constituted in Georgia. It's one that he doesn't recognize. So he doesn't feel like he can run on that ticket because he feels like what's happening he can't support. So there's somebody, a person is potentially has power and is saying, I'm not going to go and help make this happen.
I think there's a few Republican politicians who've done that, but it sounds like the governor candidate from Minnesota, Tim Walz, announced he's not running, and the Republican candidate dropped out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But I've heard of other people for other offices doing the same thing.
But so back to your question, there's also in Eugene a rapid response group. So the group that someone's, they think the ice has been spotted, they get somebody else. They're just like in Minnesota or rapid responding to those calls. So there's, when you begin to ask how you can get involved, depending on which group you're organized group they're attached to, there are a lot of ways to get involved, but don't involve going down, being directly in the face of ice.
Is Indivisible involved in helping organize the protest at the federal building?
We have two separate time slots that we do down at the federal building. One is called silent protest, and the other is called signs of fascism, signs of peace. The silent protest is basically standing in silence very seriously with signs that are indicating or protest. And the other is a protest that has signs that are held up that are giving the message of here are elements of fascism. So those are the two protest segments that we organize at the federal level.
I have two questions. First, sir, what's your name?
Stan Taylor.
Stan Taylor. And my second question is, what work is Indivisible doing around addressing one of the most vulnerable populations in our community in Eugene, the homelessness, the addicted and the unhoused, who that the population is just growing exponentially despite just
It's a great
millions
question.
of dollars coming into Eugene. Is there any work that you've done around that with Indivisible?
Well, of course, I'll go back to, we're just barely over a year old. So we're just getting our feet, but we are working to try to promote mutual aid in our community. And we're working to connect with those groups and providing mutual aid to see how we raise money or other ways that we can get the help. So that's on our radar and something we're trying to develop, but not for an area. And you know, I totally agree.
That is one of the number one crises of our community. And those people are victimized by cartels and a lot of criminal activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and so are you suggesting your Indivisible would be thinking about raising money for that? Because I don't know if you realize how much money is allegedly going toward that and not making a dent of.
Well, of course,
improvement.
you know, do what you can, right? That's really.
Well, I was just wondering what you guys are doing about it.
Right now, we don't have a lot of money raised. We're a volunteer organization. Most of our work is done through Goodwill. So we're still getting our feet.
Oh, I was just looking at the schedule for protests down at the federal building under Eugene Together Strong. Over. And it has not just Indivisible, but other groups have.
Yeah, you want to
The
do
veterans.
those off for people?
I just saw the veterans are there on Mondays, Veterans for Peace. Tuesdays is the interfaith Singing for Our Lives. Also the silent protest and the love and rage protest. And then on Wednesdays is the showing up for racial justice protest. And the 50-71 protest. And Thursdays is another Indivisible with Signs of Fascism. And Fridays is the Raging Grannies. Everybody can find us on EugeneTogetherStrong.org. And I think also you mentioned another group of ACEs that Indivisible is a part. So the ACEs may cover part of like the homeless and the police.
ACES, all the groups except for Veterans for Peace that we just mentioned are organizations that are members of this.
Okay, and the Lane County is a very different.
That's yes, Lane County American Defense Network, and that's the group that really does great work around.
But the information, if you are interested in looking more ways to step into protesting safely, some of those groups have some that aren't meeting at the federal level, they're like at 29. We have the Social Security Department.
Yes, there are different places where there are topic protests
Right.
on a regular basis. And I want to go back to what you just said. It's not the ACEs or the business website. EugeneTogetherStrong.org is a fantastic website to get information about things we've been talking about.
So we have a neighbor in our Santa Clara area. And they own a business. And a few months ago, it's a donut business, you know, over in Riviera, shopping house. So they live in this area also. Not only do they own, I don't know, does anybody know them? I got to know them. The reason I got to know them is because a few months ago, they were robbed $200,000. And so the Eugene police did find them. It happened to be that I was at my parents' home, which is just a block away up by Hender's Park, where they were all staying. They were illegals, they're Colombian, they were arrested. And I talked to them for over an hour and a half after. This is the most horrific thing that ever happened to them. $200,000, personal home inside destroyed. I don't know if you knew this. They're our neighbors. The Eugene police arrested them. They're illegal. They let them go. They did not contact us. ICE went and picked up 2, and then picked up 2 more. Accidentally, they were, as they were doing it, people were interfering. Now, the Eugene police came out and apologized, but those two people were arrested. All I'm saying is there's another side to what ICE is doing. ICE has the legal right to do this, and my neighbors are not upset with ICE arresting people who are committing crimes. And that's just one example. I have tons. Living next door to these people were over 20 illegal aliens who were flown in and had been living there for 2 years on this farm. So I don't know, they don't know if it's connected, but all I'm saying is there's another side to all of this that maybe we need to, that two things can be right at the same time. Does that make sense? That we can support our neighbors who are being affected by some of the crimes. So on Saturday, there were about 10 police officers on my street. And drones going everywhere. Oh my goodness, why? I live in a very nice neighborhood. Should I have gone and interfered? Because what we found out is, yeah, people shouldn't have been living on this property. But should I have protected my neighbor against those police officers by going and rushing them? Instead, the neighbors were asked to stand back. They shut off the streets for like 2.5 hours. So all I'm saying is there's two sides to this, and I get that you have the right to say that downtown, but there isn't any right on Friday. And I was driving on 6th Street, and cars were backed up way to Franklin Boulevard because there was this huge truck and people with protesting at the corners here and stopping traffic. So there's two sides. And I wish that we could all have a conversation. Yeah, it's here.
I feel like I have a unique perspective on that because I was previously chair of the Union Police Commission. And I'm also on the board of Asian American Council, and we actually put on a very large public safety forum, AHI public safety forum, because of the burglary rate that was targeting Asian business owners. So one thing that I'll say coming from the police commission standpoint is that the chief of police, any chief of any police department, has to make a decision based on what is reported to them by the dispatchers, and the dispatchers have to pass along whatever information is being reported to them on the top. So what Chief Skinner repeated was the narrative that was given to his dispatchers. And I think that EPD did a really commendable job of not further escalating things, because as the chief has also pointed out several times, the last thing I wanted was unarmed civilians getting into a gunfight, knife fight, whatever, with armed federal officers. And so when the tactical unit from Portland came in, EPD did its whole way. But I think that given the information, because there were people from inside the federal building calling, saying they broke the windows, they're inside the building right now. There are a lot of panicked people who work in that building besides ICE, besides DHS. We look at things where the Veterans Association, the VA, had to move their mental health services to the building on Chad Drive because it is so traumatizing for veterans trying to get their mental health to have to walk through these crowds of people who are protesting doing this. The other thing, coming as a representative of the Asian community, and I wouldn't say that I speak for all of the Asian communities, so please don't say that I'm trying to put words in the mouths of the owners of House Donut, because we're very familiar.
Right, and I talked to them from
right
her perspective.
And it's absolutely horrible what happened there. And it wasn't EPD that let them go. It was the state of Oregon, because the way that the law in the state of Oregon is written, the judge has no discretion to actually hold them for trial, which is why the feds actually have picked up the charge now. They're being prosecuted at the federal court. We've been monitoring that case very closely. What I will say though, as an Asian, and keep in mind that I'm one of these people who came to America the right way. My parents paid a lot of money to adopt me and get me naturalized. And by the way, I'm actually a great one of the head of my dirty secret. But so I was one of those people that was like, well, just come to America the right way like I did. And what we're seeing though, all over the country, if you look at what happened at the Hyundai plant in Texas, where South Koreans that were brought in and employed to teach Americans how to make these computer chips. And then they get swept up and they get handcuffed and treated like actual animals. And we're seeing so many cases of actual citizens or people who are applied for asylum and are following the process. So I would say that, yes, you're absolutely right. There are so many different sides to every story, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. I will say though, that one thing that the Asian community has been very careful about, even though we knew that the gang that was targeting us with these burglaries was from Colombia and probably had no legal right to be here, the last thing we want to do by pointing at them is to put a target on other people of brown skin. Because we don't want the Latina community to be targeted. We don't want other folks of color to have to go through the same, and even as a Korean, as a naturalized American citizen from South Korea, I still tense up when I see ICE. And so this is something that happens so much with the communities of color. So in this particular case where ICE picked up the people that the state of Oregon was unable to hold, it did work out that, yes, there are a couple of them that will hopefully be held accountable and they will go through the process. But the thing that ACO has said repeatedly, the Asian American Council of Oregon, is that every single human being should go through due process because this is America, and in America, you are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, I think it's very complicated. There's a lot of nuances that have to be taken into consideration. And what's happening in this country is not the people you describe are criminals, and the criminal justice system should deal with them. That's from rights of due process and taking them through the criminal justice system. And it's, in my opinion, a shame that some of them wind up being able to be part of the country and not be parts of that legal process where they get their due process, but also are judged for their activities and potentially convicted of a crime in jail. So there are obviously two sides to every most side to every story. But I really appreciate the bottom line that you're talking about. That everyone has rights. If you look at the Constitution doesn't talk about U.S. citizens or Americans. It says talks about his rights to people as persons. And everyone has it. So we need to make sure and for those who need their votes or those these crimes, they should be rounded up and invested and put through the criminal justice system. And nobody should pick up and sent to the Tacoma, like Texas, and put it into the detention center without due process. And that is basic constitutional law.
Isn't the Supreme Court looking at that?
Process of law.
No, the idea of when the word people, person, is that who, if they're talking about Americans or everyone in the world?
Anybody residing in the US.
Right, but
That's how it says.
I believe that they're looking at that.
Well, it might be. Why don't you see?
I think they're looking at that. I mean, I don't know which way they're gonna rule.
So you come on, Supreme Court people just